Welcome back to the lecture hall, everyone. Let's get right into today's explainer. Usually as students of political science, we're looking at things like treaties, legislation, or elections to really map out power dynamics. But today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating. We're looking at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. We're going to use it as our primary case study to see exactly what happens when executive authority collides with global sports, turning international events into highly volatile arenas for leverage and policy. Okay, let's anchor ourselves right away with a core conceptual framework, and that is sports diplomacy. By definition, this is the calculated use of sports to influence diplomatic, social, and political relations on the world stage. So we're not just talking about a fun soccer tournament here. We are analyzing how international sporting events act as massive, highly visible geopolitical tools for state actors. And we can see this diplomatic leverage recognized right in our primary source data. President Donald Trump has explicitly called the upcoming tournament a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. From our analytical perspective, this isn't just about sports fandom. It's a calculated recognition that the World Cup is a massive global platform to project national identity and leverage American power. To keep our analysis structured, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The political arena. 2. Foreign policy and diplomatic friction. 3. Domestic politics and infrastructure. And finally, 4. Evaluating the institutional impact. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the political arena. The baseline context for our structural analysis here is a pretty unique tri-nation tournament. The 2026 World Cup is co-hosted by the US, Mexico, and Canada. But as our source material shows, the real dynamics of this arrangement are heavily driven by the very close working relationship between two specific figures: a key executive actor, US President Donald Trump, and a key institutional actor, FIFA boss Gianni Infantino. Understanding the dynamic between these two is absolutely critical for analyzing the massive policy outputs we're about to see. To really make sense of the administration's actions around the tournament, we can drop our data into two distinct policy impact buckets. On one side, we have foreign and international issues, things like Iranian visa denials and breaking FIFA guarantees. And on the flip side, we have domestic and local issues, specifically leveraging match locations and threatening democratic-run cities. Grouping like this helps us clearly see the dual-pronged approach of executive power happening in real time. Moving right along to Section 2, Foreign Policy and Diplomatic Friction. When asked directly about Iran's participation in the tournament, President Trump gave a very blunt dismissal, stating simply, "I really don't care." Now, for our analysis, we can't just brush that off as an off-the-cuff remark. That is a key data point for executive rhetoric. It sets a very distinct, highly publicized tone for how the administration handles diplomatic friction at a supposedly neutral event. But here's the crucial part. How does that rhetoric translate into concrete bureaucratic action? Well, we see it manifested through state-enforced visa denials executed against Iranian officials. This move effectively blocked the entire Iranian delegation from attending the official draw ceremony. So this isn't just talk, it's a surprisingly aggressive application of foreign policy tools directly impacting global sports logistics. And this brings us to a classic clash that we study all the time in international relations: institutional contracts versus sovereign authority. On one side, you have FIFA's contractual guarantees, the open handshake promising open access for all teams and fans. But on the opposing side, you hit the brick wall of US government action, which is prioritizing strict immigration enforcement and diplomatic visa denials. It is a textbook example of what happens when international agreements slam right into firm national border enforcement. All right, let's pivot to Section 3, Domestic Politics and Infrastructure. Bringing it back to the domestic sphere, our source data indicates the executive branch is actively using the tournament as a mechanism for political leverage. Specifically, the administration has threatened to pull World Cup matches away from municipal jurisdictions run by Democrats. It's deeply ironic, frankly, seeing how a global event that's usually framed as this big unifying moment can become a really sharp wedge in partisan domestic politics. But as political scientists, we have to weigh this standoff objectively. On one side of the scale, you have this federal executive leverage, the threat of relocating matches for political reasons. But on the other side, you have municipal reality. The simple logistical fact is that these Democratic-run cities are predominantly the ones that actually have the massive stadium infrastructure required to host a World Cup match. It's this fascinating real-world game of chicken between federal political intent and local structural necessity. Let's wrap things up with Section 4, Evaluating the Institutional Impact. The big structural concern jumping out from our source material is this growing realization that the United States might be actively breaking its baseline institutional promises to FIFA. When a host nation uses an event for both rigid foreign policy enforcement and domestic partisan strategy, it fundamentally fractures those open access guarantees that international sports organizations completely rely on to function. Tracing this out chronologically shows a clear escalation. Phase 1, the bidding phase. The U.S. agrees to strict open access guarantees just to win the hosting rights. Then, in Phase 2, the pre-tournament phase, we immediately see those promises contradicted by state-enforced visa denials, blocking the Iranian delegation. And that brings us to Phase 3, the current phase, where the entire event is shadowed by these ongoing political and diplomatic controversies. So, I'm going to leave you with this final analytical question for your take-home assignment. Based on the policy impacts we've reviewed today, is executive power elevating the tournament? Is it making the 2026 World Cup greater? Or is the political maneuvering completely overshadowing the sport itself? Think about that friction between sovereign leverage and institutional agreements as you review your notes. Thanks for joining today's explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.